Hi, this is Liqian Ren, Director of Modern Alpha Wisdom Tree ETFs. Welcome to China of Tomorrow podcast series, where we navigate China, India, Japan, and the broader emerging markets with members of Wisdom Tree and other industry leaders. Hi, today is August 4th, 2025. How time flies. Today, I'm going to quickly talk about US-China had a meeting, Secretary Bessent and China's counterparts, led by Vice Premier He Lifeng. He does have the full confidence of President Xi, so it didn't really yield much, and we want to comment a little bit more on what to expect, and also potential President Trump's visit to China or not, and some of the local Chinese headlines. Again, on the first, important issue, it was really between US and China. It's not just trade tariffs. So if people are looking, this week, President Trump has give all these percentages, UK got 10%, and then Japan, South Korea, the so-called allies got 15%, Taiwan got 20%, which was a bit of a domestic issue in Taiwan, and then India got 25, and Canada got 35. That was a surprise, and one of the biggest was EU getting 15%, and I'm sure people in within European Union, it's a big discussion as well. As the tariff war between US and China is a top line question in China, but I think for China, it's somewhat different. China is probably the only country right now can say a little bit no to the US. Through its supply chain resilience and also on rare earth supply. I think China right now dominates rare earth supply, which led to another question about Nvidia's H20 chip sale in China. There you also have a lot of headlines where on the US side there are people who wrote a petition says that the US should not sell. Well, on Chinese side, there is a Internet Security Ministry, which is want to investigate whether H20 chips has a backdoor that allows US to remotely stop the chips from working. If that is true, obviously China doesn't want to have that kind of chips. And but again, Nvidia came out and denied it. So all these commercial headlines is mixed with political headlines. And I think China and the US is in a position where actually for either of the countries, it's not relatively not necessary in the worst case. So US obviously has the power to impose tariffs because a lot of other countries, still needs to export to US. China, on the other hand, has this rare earth plus the supply chain resilience that is also giving it some cards to play. So I think right now you can see very different countries how they responding to the US shift of its own economic policy. So on that, I think in that background, US-China didn't reach much in Stockholm. It's not a surprise. I think on Twitter, I was quite early to say that, I made a joke, is it Stockholm syndrome or actually Stockholm framework? I don't expect any major China-US deal happening, particularly if you look at the headlines. I think originally President Trump was kind of planning to go to China, but now you are seeing more headlines about they're more likely to meet in third countries, like along the APEC meetings, or maybe in Southeast Asia, a third country destination. I don't think either country, either China or US, is ruling out a visit to Beijing. Beijing is 2-hour flight from Seoul, so it's not really logistics. It's really politics. How much, US is willing to give and how much China is willing to give. Right now, at least, we still have August and September and 2 months of negotiations. For now, I think neither side is willing to give much. So US-China is in these short-term very delicate balance. That's what I call it. I don't expect any grand, bargaining. That's just totally impossible given the current situation. On the other hand, what can tilt this kind of balance? That's an interesting question to think. I think it's more domestic driven. So if China economy is doing substantially worse, or if US economy is doing worse than it hoped, then both US and China are much more willing to negotiate and give something. But right now, China's export is not doing as well as it hoped, but it's not doing as bad as people originally feared. And then in the US, it's similar. I think, the US economy, we have so much discussion about, the revision of jobs numbers, which is a completely different issue. I think in this day and age, people got to, question like why the survey method is still the dominant method of coming up with government numbers. So I think that's a very valid discussion. I hope it's not buried in a lot of the political back and forth. But indeed, in the older days, numbers are mainly survey-based, and nowadays when anybody is connected, and government probably have really good image on who's working and who's not. So, based on the social security tax you pay. So I think the method of calculating how many people who are employed probably will change in the US. And actually that's also interesting in China, because a lot of economic data has low credibility within the public. And I think a lot of it, if you take the politics out of it, there are a lot of economic questions behind it. Obviously, politics is very emotional, so people go for the political angle. But I think, for ordinary people, you really want to pay attention to the economic angle. So on that, I don't expect, there will be more negotiations, and we'll see what's going to happen in the next 2 months. I think my expectation has always been not too optimistic, but also not too pessimistic on it. So I think the baseline is, China and the US will meet, and both will go on. And relative to other countries, China actually probably, does slightly better out of this whole trade war. US obviously does better than the rest of the people, the countries and the regions. The second, I think, is a little bit about China. The macro situation domestically, it's still very cool. I think the government is going to realize it has to come out with more. And another thing, it is coming out some money. China gave about $500 for any child who were born per year for the first 3 years. I know it's nothing from the American point of view, because typical, I think Americans are used to get some money from the government. In China, this is actually the second ever after 1949 that the Chinese government under the party gives some money to the people. So actually, it's $500. It's not a huge amount, but it is actually very historical from China's domestic politics point of view. So that cannot be, I think, brushed aside. China right now is still having, issues in the housing market. I think it's ultimately China is in a very painful transition away from more investment-led, housing-led into more industrial upgrade. That doesn't mean the investment number will go down. It's just that housing investment used to be a huge part of it, and now it's not going to be. And then the investment is probably going to go into other, upgrading the industry. And that is, in current environment, China, the profitability of Chinese companies definitely will get a hit, because you invest, you have to spend money, and then your future is uncertain unless China is successful in its tech competition with the US. then a lot of those investment will be I wouldn't say wasted, it will be spent, but with, lower return. And I think that's similar for the US. Right now, US is investing significantly in AI. Now, if the AI thing it turns out to be as good as people hoped, then the return on investment will be high. But if the AI revolution is not as much as people hoped, or the market priced in, then the market will get disappointed. So I think US China in many ways is in a similar situation. Domestically, Chinese headlines is not on tariffs anymore. You see there are a few very socially charged headlines. One is about, whether someone has private information, a citizen's private information, and misuse them. The other headline is about more gender kind of a fight. A girl accused a boy of harassment, and ultimately the court says no, but the university did give punishment to the boy, and then now he's in a depression, and it turns into this very unfortunate chain of events. And I think one lesson is that sometimes nowadays with social media, people took their case right to social media, and it can backfire. I think in the US, probably there is enough of a legal system to protect, but still these kind of things happen. In China, it is definitely, since the legal system protection is not as robust, so there are more people who are willing to use social media, because in China, if a news went viral, your case is more likely to be addressed. Because for the local government, they're very afraid of viral news, because when the news goes viral, everybody knows it, and then some things, then the top leadership will know. Obviously all the Politburo people, they go online too, and President Xi, I'm sure he pays attention to the top headlines in China as well. So in China, you have this like kind of a strange situation. Like, you can get justice if you can make your news viral. Now, whether the news goes viral is also somewhat controlled by the government. Sometimes they can control it very well, sometimes they couldn't. So that is how, instead of a legal system, a lot of Chinese try to get the justice. But sometimes you can backfire, right? You put a case out on the social media space, like in this case, the girl who thinks that she was wronged, and she put very strong wordings on the social media, and her probably initial calculation is that most of people will be on her side because generally you sympathize with women. But on this case, actually the public turned against her, the way she's very using strong language on the boy, and the boy is 19 and she was 21. So actually a lot of people sympathize with this college boy who is under so-called harassment accusation by the girl. So this was a complete miscalculation, and I will say completely divided the Chinese society, and now it's really the top news. And the university that involved, Wuhan University, is a very top university as well, and it is in a very delicate situation. And I'm using this case not to making political commentary, but as an illustration of how China, the so-called the economic issues a lot of time, unlike in the US. I think in the US usually a lot of these things somewhat, social media still have viral cases, but get solved somewhat more by existing institutions. Well, in China, you don't have the existing institutions like the court. So every controversial news is fought over the whole public opinion. So that's how the media landscape in China works. And on economics, that also has this element of this. So for example, stimulus, I think the top leadership is still not yet fully convinced the stimulus works. But now, after 1 year, the stimulus, physical stimulus, has shown there is that does increase people's consumption. So the top leadership, they actually pay attention to the top news. They're a little bit more likely to stimulate. So in that sense, in the next half years, I think the baseline is that when the economy is really bad, there will be some money coming out to make sure the worst doesn't happen. I think that is still a very good baseline. So, if sentiment turns very negative on China or on the equity, it's actually a good time to, even put in some, buy some and stick with it. So anyway, that hopefully this, in a short period of time, we can, in the future, we can get into more, longer discussion, more detailed discussion, but these are the major headlines of the last 2 weeks. Thanks, and you can follow us on Twitter. I'm on at Liqian_Ren. If you just Google my name, it's there. We are on our company website, wisdomtree.com. We are on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. We are also on YouTube. I think you can also give us feedback in terms of topics you'd like to listen. Thank you.